The wind screamed across the flats, kicking dust against the horse's flanks. Elias Rourke leaned low in the saddle, coat snapping behind him, his daughter June clinging to his back. The sun was falling, red, cruel, the kind of sun that burns the world to silence. They were halfway through Dead Crow Canyon when June tugged at his coat. "Papa," she whispered. Something moved. Elias reined in. The old horse stopped with a grunt, hooves sinking into the cracked riverbed. Wind hissed through the rocks like snakes whispering secrets. He squinted where June pointed, by a tangle of sagebrush, something pale and lumpy. The thing twitched. Elias's hand slid to the colt at his side. "Coyotes, maybe, or worse, men." He swung down slow, boots crunching dry sand. His eyes never left the shape. A burlap sack, big enough to hold a calf, tied at the top with old rope. It moved again. Elias froze. The wind died, as if the desert itself held its breath. "Stay there, June," he said, voice flat. The girl nodded, eyes wide beneath her straw hat. Elias stepped closer. The smell hit first. Iron, sweat, and dust baked under sun. He nudged the sack with his boot. It groaned. He drew his knife, the same one he'd carried through the Indian Wars, and cut through the rope. The knot gave way with a sigh. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then fingers. Thin, trembling fingers clawing out like roots through soil. He dropped to one knee and tore the burlap open. A woman spilled halfway out, skin scorched, lips cracked, hair tangled in sand. Her wrists were raw from bindings. She tried to speak, voice rasping like dry paper. "Please." The word barely made it past her throat. Elias caught her before she fell fully into the dirt. Her pulse fluttered, faint as a moth's wing. She couldn't weigh more than a bundle of sticks. "God Almighty," he muttered. Behind him, June slid down from the horse, small boots pattering toward them. "Papa, is she dead?" "Not yet." June crouched beside him, staring at the woman's face. Her eyes, what little could be seen through grime, fluttered open. Hazel, glazed with fever. They locked on June for a heartbeat before rolling back. "Papa." June's voice was softer now. "She's pretty." Elias swallowed hard. "She's hurt bad." He looked around. Nothing but the endless sweep of desert and the whisper of wind. No wagon ruts, no tracks leading in or out. Whoever left her here wanted her forgotten. The woman stirred. "Please don't sack again." June flinched. Elias laid a hand on her shoulder. "Get the canteen." She ran for the saddlebag, sand whipping around her feet. Elias lifted the woman's head and poured a trickle of water past her lips. She coughed once, weak, but some color crept back in her face. "Easy now," he said quietly. Her eyes opened again, cloudy but searching. Where am I?" "Nowhere worth remembering," he said. June returned, clutching the canteen. She knelt, hands trembling as she offered it. The woman's fingers brushed the girl's wrist, soft, almost tender. June smiled despite herself. Elias looked away. Something in that touch stirred an ache he'd buried long ago. "Papa," June said again, voice hushed, almost dreamlike. "She looks like Momma." Elias's hand stilled. The name hit like a hammer to the ribs. He stood abruptly, scanning the horizon. Anything to escape the ghost that name carried. His eyes caught on something fluttering by the rocks. He strode over and picked it up. A scrap of torn fabric, red once, now sun-bleached. Bloodstained. He looked further. Tracks. Boot prints. At least 3 sets, heading west toward Crow's Bend. He turned back. The woman had slumped sideways again, June trying to lift her head. "Papa, help me." He knelt, wrapping his coat around the woman's shoulders. The fabric swallowed her whole. She shivered against the heat like someone caught in snow. "Can we take her home?" June asked. Elias hesitated. "If we do, it'll bring trouble." June stared at him. "Please, Papa. She's all alone." Her words twisted something deep inside him. He saw, just for a breath, another little girl kneeling beside another woman, his wife before the fever took her. He exhaled through his teeth. "All right, but she rides in front. Keep her awake, you hear?" June nodded eagerly. Elias lifted the woman. She was light as wind, and set her on the horse. She moaned once, but didn't wake. June climbed up behind, holding her steady as Elias mounted. They started toward home, slow, the sun bleeding out behind the ridge. For a while, there was only the sound of hoofbeats and wind through dry grass. Then June's small voice again. "Papa, she called you something." Elias glanced back. "What?" June looked down at the woman's lips. "She said your name." He frowned. "She don't know me." June shrugged. Maybe she dreamed it. The girl's tone was innocent, but Elias felt the weight of something unseen pressing closer, like the desert was holding its secrets just under the sand, waiting. They rode on. Night crept in, slow and heavy. The stars blinked awake, and the air turned cold enough to bite. When they reached the rise overlooking the homestead, Elias looked down at the single lantern glowing in the window. The house seemed smaller than ever, just wood, wind, and memory. June slid down first, running to open the door. Elias lifted the woman into his arms again. She stirred once more, eyes half open, staring up at him through strands of filthy hair. Why help me?" she whispered. Elias didn't answer. He carried her inside and laid her on a narrow bed by the fire. June stood nearby, clutching a blanket to her chest. "She's gonna live, ain't she, Papa?" He stared at the woman, at her cracked lips and trembling hands, at the faint heartbeat under his palm. "I don't know," he said. Then June whispered something so soft it might have been just the wind. "Papa, she's Momma." Elias looked at his daughter. The flicker of the fire lit her eyes, made them shine like tiny suns. He turned back to the woman, jaw tight. Outside, the coyotes began to wail, long, mournful cries rising from the canyon floor. And for the first time in years, Elias Rourke felt fear crawl up his spine. The desert had given him something tonight, and it never gave without Takin back. The fever hit before dawn. Elias woke to the sound of thrashing, the woman's body jerking against the bedsheets, sweat pouring off her like rain. Her breath came in ragged gasps, eyes rolling beneath half-closed lids. The fire had burned low. The only light was from the red coals, painting her face in ghost colors. He moved quick. A wet rag, a pan of cool water. June was already there, kneeling by the bedside, reading softly from her mother's old Bible. "And though I walk through the valley of the shadow." The woman's arm shot out, seizing June's wrist. Her voice cracked through the darkness. "Don't let him bury me again." June screamed. Elias pulled her back, pressing the woman's shoulders down. "Easy now. Ain't nobody burying you." Her body convulsed once, then went still. Only the sound of wind scraping the shutters. Elias stared down at her, chest rising and falling like a hunted thing. "Lord help us," he muttered. Outside, the coyotes howled again. By morning, she hadn't woken. Elias stepped outside to the trough, dunked his head, and let the water wash the night from him. The desert stretched out endless and cruel, same as always. But something felt different now, like the ground itself was listening. June appeared in the doorway, clutching her doll. "She keeps talking in her sleep, Papa." "What's she saying?" "Names. Crow's Bend. Preacher's Men. Something about her baby." Elias wiped his face with his sleeve. "Don't listen too close. Dreams don't always tell the truth." But the name stuck in his mind like burrs. Crow's Bend, 30 miles west. The kind of place even the law rode around. He went back inside. The woman, Clara, she'd whispered once, was breathing steady now. Her hands were bandaged, her skin pale under the grime. June sat beside her, feeding her drops of broth. "She's getting better," June said with quiet pride. Elias nodded, though doubt shadowed his eyes. "Keep her that way." 3 days passed. The sun baked the hills. Buzzards circled high. By the fourth evening, Clara sat up. She moved slow, like someone remembering what it meant to be alive. Elias handed her a tin cup of water. "Drink easy." She did, eyes darting around the room. Fireplace, Bible, little girl sleeping in the corner. Finally, her gaze settled on him. "You could have left me there." "Could have," he said. "Why didn't you?" Elias shrugged. "Didn't seem right." She smiled faintly, one corner of her mouth twitching like she wasn't used to it. "Right's a rare thing out here." He didn't argue. The silence stretched between them, filled with the crackle of wood. Then she said, "You got a wife?" "Pat." "Sorry." He grunted, poured himself coffee, and leaned against the table. "You got folks." Her face hardened. "Pat." They let the fire do the talking for a while after that. The next morning, Elias rode into town for supplies. Folks stared. Word traveled faster than wind in a place like this. By the time he reached the general store, two men on the porch stopped talking altogether. Inside, old man Haskins leaned close. "You keeping a woman out there, Rourke?" Elias set his coins on the counter. "Don't see how that's your business." Haskins swallowed. "Ain't my business, but it's theirs." He nodded toward the window. 5 riders had just come into town, dust trailing behind them like smoke. Each wore a dark duster. At their head rode a man with a preacher's collar and a revolver strapped to his chest. Elias's hand twitched near his belt. "That him?" Haskins nodded once. "Preacher Harlan Briggs. He's a skin about a woman." Elias didn't wait for more. He mounted up and rode hard, dust biting his throat. By sundown, he was back at the ranch. The woman was outside, leaning against the post, bare feet in the dirt. She looked stronger, color in her cheeks again. "You shouldn't be standing out here," he said. "I'm tired of hiding," she replied. "Then tell me who they are." She looked past him, toward the dying light over the ridge. "Men I once rode with. The kind that preach with bullets. Why were they hunting you?" "I stopped believing in their gospel." Elias crossed his arms. "You killed one of them?" Her eyes met his. "Wouldn't you?" The silence between them cracked open, filled with wind and memory. He saw her then, not the broken stranger from the sack, but a woman carved from pain and iron. The kind who'd seen too much to flinch anymore. June's voice broke through the air behind them. "Papa, riders!" Elias turned. On the far ridge, silhouettes against the sunset, 5 men, motionless, watching. "They found you," he said. "They always do," Clara murmured. Night fell fast. Elias barred the door, loaded the shotgun, and checked his Colt. Clara sat by the fire, cleaning an old revolver he hadn't seen her touch before. Her hand was steady now, sure, familiar. "You handle that like you were born to it," he said. She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Maybe I was. What did you do before all this?" "Shot things that needed shooting." The fire popped. Sparks drifted up like dying stars. Elias studied her face, the scar beneath her jaw, the hollowness behind her eyes. "They called you a thief. They call me worse." He waited. "Finally," she said, "I was Harlan Briggs's wife, till I saw what he truly was." The words hung in the air like smoke. "He preached salvation," she continued softly. "Said the Lord wanted him to cleanse the borderlands. What he meant was selling women and burning the ones who said no. I ran. He sent his men after me. They buried me for it." June stirred in her sleep, murmuring. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't deserve that sack, Mr. Rourke. Not after all I tried to put right." Elias stared into the fire. "You still got a death mark on your back. Then maybe it's time it found the wrong woman." He looked up. Her eyes burned like the coals between them, alive, fierce, unyielding. Outside, hooves scraped rock. Low voices drifted through the window, 5 of them, whispering prayers that didn't sound holy. Elias stood. "Tomorrow, they'll come proper." Clara loaded her revolver, each click echoing in the quiet. "Let him." He nodded once, slow. "Then tomorrow, we both stop running." And for the first time in years, Elias Rourke smiled. A hard, dangerous thing. The wind rose outside, carrying the scent of rain and gunpowder. The desert was listening again, and somewhere out there, the riders were too. The first bullet hit the fence post before dawn. Elias ducked instinctively, splinters slicing his cheek. A second shot cracked the air, echoing across the canyon like thunder. The horses screamed in their pen. Clara was already at the window, revolver drawn. Her voice was low, steady. "They're here." Elias grabbed the shotgun off the table. "How many?" She squinted through the thin light of morning. 5. Same as before. Another shot tore through the glass, scattering shards across the floor. June yelped from behind the stove, clutching her doll tight. Elias crouched beside her. "Stay down, darling. Don't move till I say." The next silence was thick, an awful, waiting kind of quiet. Then came the hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate, the kind of rhythm that made men remember their sins. They rode out of the mist like ghosts, black dusters flapping behind them. At the front was preacher Harlan Briggs, tall, broad, face half-shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat and the gleam of a silver cross at his throat. He reined his horse to a stop at the gate, eyes on the house. Elias roared. His voice carried clear and heavy. "You got something belongs to me." Elias stepped to the doorway, shotgun leveled. "Ain't a damn thing on this land belongs to you." The preacher smiled thinly. "Then you're harboring a sinner, a woman who turned from the word and from her husband." "She's no wife of yours," Elias growled. "Every soul's mine to claim, one way or another," the preacher said, tapping the cross. "Now hand her over, and I'll let your child live long enough to forget your name." Clara pushed past Elias before he could stop her. She stepped onto the porch, bare feet on the boards, her hair loose around her face. "You should have buried me deeper, Harlan." The preacher's eyes flickered, just for a breath. "Clara May," he said slowly, "you look fit enough for Hangen after all." Elias raised a shotgun. "You take one more step, and I'll test that theory." The preacher's men shifted in their saddles, hands sliding toward their holsters. The air itself seemed to tighten. Then Harlan laughed, a deep, hollow sound that carried across the flats. "We'll be back at sundown," he said. "This place will burn with her in it, and any fool that stands beside her." He turned his horse and rode off, the others trailing like shadows. Dust rose behind them, curling in the morning light like smoke from a grave. Inside, Clara leaned against the wall, trembling though her voice stayed cold. "He'll come back." Elias set the shotgun down, jaw clenched. "I figured." She turned toward him, eyes burning. "You should take June and ride. Tonight." He met her stare. "And leave you? I've brought death to every man that's tried to help me." He loaded a shell into the shotgun with a sharp click. "Then maybe it's time death met someone meaner." Clara almost smiled. Almost. All day, the air grew heavier. Clouds crawled in from the west. Dark, low, heavy with the promise of rain or ruin. Elias repaired the fence, sharpened blades, filled the lanterns. Clara cleaned her gun with slow precision, every motion practiced, certain. June watched from the porch steps, quiet as a sparrow. "Papa," she asked finally, "why do they want to hurt her?" Elias wiped his hands on a rag. "Because she stopped being afraid of them." The girl nodded solemnly, as if she understood more than her years allowed. By the time the sun began to sink, the world had gone still. Even the wind held its breath. Clara stepped outside, wearing Elias's old coat, revolver holstered at her hip. Her gaze swept the horizon. "They'll come from the ridge." Elias nodded. "That's how I do it. Then we wait." The first rider appeared as the last light bled from the sky. Then another, and another. They came slow, deliberate, as if enjoying the walk to damnation. Elias stood by the door, rifle braced on the frame. Clara stood in the open, 5 paces ahead, her silhouette a dark cut against the dying light. The preacher's voice came again, smooth as snake oil. "You got one last chance, Clara May. Step aside, and the man and child go free." Clara's answer was the cock of her revolver. Harlan smiled. "So be it." The world exploded. Gunfire tore the silence apart. Muzzle flashes lit the dark like lightning. Elias fired once, dropped one of the riders clean off his horse. Clara moved with a grace that didn't belong to the broken woman he'd found. She was fast, deadly, precise. Each shot found its mark, but they were 5, and the desert offered no cover. Elias felt a bullet rip past his arm. Another shattered the window near June's hiding place. "Stay down," he shouted, reloading, firing again. Clara stepped forward, reloading on instinct, face lit by the blaze of gunpowder. Her eyes locked on Harlan's silhouette. He dismounted, walking toward her, calm as Sunday morning. "You can't kill what's blessed by the Lord, woman." Clara fired. The bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him half around, but he laughed, blood blooming through his coat. "Still quick," he said. "Still mine." Elias took aim, but Harlan ducked behind a fallen horse. Another shot cracked. Clara gasped, dropping to one knee. Clara! Elias shouted, rushing forward. She waved him back. Keep your girl safe. Her hand pressed to her side, blood, dark and heavy. But she raised her gun again, arm trembling. The preacher stepped from cover, smirking. This time, I'll finish the sermon proper. Then, lightning split the clouds above. For a moment, the whole valley blazed white. Clara fired through it. Once, twice. Harlan staggered, felt his knees, eyes wide. He looked down, saw the blood on his hands, and laughed weakly. Ain't no woman takes me down. Clara stepped closer, barrel steady. You're right, she said softly. The devil did. She pulled the trigger one last time. Silence. The rain began to fall, slow, heavy drops hissing against hot earth. Elias lowered his gun, chest heaving. The other riders were gone, scattered like smoke. He walked to her, knelt beside her as the storm broke full. Blood soaked through the coat at her waist, but her eyes stayed open, fierce and alive. You're hit bad, he said. I've been worse. He looked at her, rain streaking down his face, mixing with sweat and dust, and everything he couldn't say. June, he called softly. It's over. The girl came running, bare feet splashing through mud. She threw herself into Clara's arms. Papa, she whispered, looking up, voice trembling through tears. She's Momma. Elias closed his eyes. For a long moment, the sound of the rain filled everything. The blood, the mud, the dying firelight. When he opened them again, Clara was still breathing, faint but stubborn. The woman who wouldn't die. He gathered her in his arms, lifting her from the dirt as thunder rolled across the plains. Let's get you home, he said. Behind them, the preacher's body lay still in the mud. The rain washed the blood from his cross, carried it down the hill, and buried it deep in the hungry earth. The wind was sharp enough to cut skin. Dust lifted off the ridge like ghost smoke as the first pale fingers of dawn broke across the desert. A single rider moved through it, coat torn, hat low, rifle across the saddle. From the canyon below came the echo of horses, many horses. Mara didn't look back. She rode barehanded. The reins looped through blood-worn fingers. Behind her, the riders from Crow's Bend thundered through the gully, their shouts swallowed by the rising sun. Her hair whipped against her face, sticky with sweat and grit. Ahead lay the dead riverbed and the one thing that could slow them, sand deep enough to take a horse to its knees. Hold steady, girl, she whispered to her mare, voice cracking. We make that ridge, we make the story. The mare stumbled once, recovered, lungs rattling like dying coals. A bullet whined past, tearing through the empty air beside her. Another struck the saddle horn, splintering leather. The woman didn't flinch, just bent low and pushed harder. The lead rider behind her, Clay Harker, rose in his stirrups. His voice carried like a curse. You should have stayed dead in that sack, woman. Mara's hand found the rifle. She turned in the saddle just long enough to see his shape, dark against the light, and fired. The crack split the morning wide open. Harker's hat jumped, then fell. He stayed in the saddle, but his arm went limp. The rest slowed, not out of mercy, but fear. Mara's mare lunged into the sandpit, hooves sinking deep. She swung off before the animal faltered and slapped its flank, sending it free. Her boots sank with each step as she climbed toward the ridge, every muscle shaking, every breath a curse against the men who had left her to die. She reached the crest just as the sun burst fully from the horizon, blinding gold flooding the valley. Down below, the riders fanned out, faces hard and pale. Lay down your gun, one called. She didn't. Instead, she lifted the rifle to her shoulder and stood tall, taller than she had any right to after all she'd lost. Behind her, the sky burned crimson, and the sound of another horse came from the far side of the ridge. Papa! The small voice hit her like a prayer. From the east, the old cowboy rode hard, his daughter clutched in front of him. The girl's hair streamed like a banner, her small hands gripping tight to her father's coat. Mara blinked against the light, tears cutting paths through the dust on her cheeks. The cowboy pulled up beside her, his eyes catching hers for the first time since that night in the storm, when he'd thought her gone. You should have stayed in the cabin, he said hoarsely. She gave him a tired smile. You should have locked the door. The riders below started moving again, slow and sure. Harker, pale but alive, raised his pistol. The cowboy drew his revolver. Get the girl behind me. Mara shook her head. She's already behind you. And then the world cracked open. Gunfire rolled through the canyon like thunder. Bullets sparked off stone, ricocheted off faith and fury. Mara and the cowboy stood side by side, two ghosts who refused to lie down. She moved like someone born of vengeance and mercy both. He fired like a man making peace with every sin he ever carried. When it was done, the sand was quiet again. Only the wind spoke. Harker lay in the dust, staring up at a sky too wide for forgiveness. The other riders were gone. Those still breathing had fled back toward Crow's Bend. Mara lowered her rifle, chest heaving, and turned to where the little girl had slipped off the horse. The child ran to her, small arms flinging around Mara's waist. I told you, Papa, she said softly. She's Momma. The cowboy froze, his gun lowered slowly, hand trembling. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind and the slow creak of leather as the sun rose higher. Mara knelt, touching the girl's hair, then looked up at him, eyes full of something fierce and fragile. I don't know what's left of me, she whispered. He stepped forward, shadow falling over them both. Enough, he said. There's enough. And somewhere in that desert, the dawn took shape around them, the kind of light legends are born in. Years later, old men in saloons would tell of the woman who rode at dawn, the one who came back from the sack in the sand, who faced the riders of Crow's Bend and never bowed. They'd say her ghost still crossed that ridge at first light, a whisper in the wind, a warning to every man who ever thought mercy was weakness. But out there, beyond the stories and the dust, a small homestead stood quiet under the sun. A little girl laughed in the yard. A mare grazed in peace. And a woman, once buried by the world, walked out to meet the morning alive.